The fluorescent lights above me hummed with a clinical coldness, casting long, sharp shadows against the polished granite floors of the St. Jude funeral home, like a stage set for a play no one wanted to watch. I'd been scrubbing these floors and polishing brass handles for 5 years now, but I'd never felt a silence this heavy pressing against my chest. The air didn't smell of flowers yet. The delivery trucks were late. Instead, it smelled of industrial antiseptic. Too much antiseptic. Its chemical sting mixing with a lingering trace of expensive cologne and the metallic scent of fear that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. My hands were raw inside my yellow latex gloves. I'd been on my feet for a double shift, pushing my cart past mahogany doors and velvet ropes that guarded a casket worth more than my entire life's earnings. Outside the viewing room, the funeral directors spoke in hushed, frantic tones about the man lying in state, their voices carrying that particular terror reserved for monsters who had finally been slain. "It's going to be a war zone," the facility manager whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the chill. "Nelson Williams dead at 32, an overdose, they're saying. Who manages to get close enough to drug a man like that?" his assistant replied, glancing nervously at the double doors. "Look at him. Even dead, he looks dangerous." I shouldn't have been lingering near the entrance. I was supposed to be invisible. That's what Mr. Henderson had barked at me when he hired me. Clean the glass, empty the bins, and vanish. We were the ghosts in their grieving process. Nothing more. But something about this viewing felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the security detail outside was checking their earpieces every 30 seconds. Maybe it was the stark contrast of the body itself, positioned in the center of the room in a pristine white suit that clashed violently with the dark ink creeping up his neck and the silver piercings in his eyebrow. I moved toward the casket, rag in hand, intending to wipe a smudge from the glass and disappear before the mob arrived. But as I leaned over the face of the city's most feared man, the silence was broken not by a mourner, but by a sound that shouldn't exist in a room full of death. Before we dive into this story, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's amazing to see how far these stories reach, and I love connecting with readers from all corners of the globe. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. And if you're already part of the community, show some love with a like. It helps more people discover stories like this one. Now, let's get into it. Nelson Williams is about to wake up in his own casket, and nothing will ever be the same. A breath. Not the imagined kind. Not a trick of the mind or a draft through the ventilation system. A real, ragged inhale that pulled the dead man's chest upward beneath the white silk of his suit. I stumbled backward, my cart crashing into the wall with a metallic clang that echoed through the viewing room like a gunshot. The rag fell from my hands. My throat closed around a scream that wouldn't come. Nelson Williams's eyes snapped open. They weren't the cloudy, vacant eyes of a corpse. They were dark and furious and very much alive, pupils contracting against the harsh overhead lights. His fingers twitched against the satin lining of the casket, then curled into fists. For a long, impossible moment, we stared at each other, the cleaning woman and the dead man, both of us frozen in mutual horror. "Jesus Christ," he rasped, his voice like gravel scraped over broken glass. The scream finally tore out of me. Outside, someone shouted. Footsteps thundered toward the viewing room. Nelson's head jerked toward the sound, survival instinct overriding whatever paralysis still gripped his body. He tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back into the casket with a grunt of pain, his legs refusing to cooperate. "Help me," he snarled at me, extending one trembling hand. "Now." My brain was still trying to reconcile the fundamental impossibility of what I was seeing. Dead men didn't wake up. They didn't demand help. They didn't look at you with eyes that promised violence if you didn't comply. The doors burst open. Security poured in, guns drawn, faces twisted in confusion as they processed the scene. The empty casket, the man struggling to pull himself upright using the brass handles, me pressed against the wall like I'd seen a ghost. Which, technically, I had. "He's alive!" someone screamed from the hallway. "Williams is alive." Chaos exploded through the funeral home like a lit match in a gas station. Voices erupted into shouts. Radios crackled. Somewhere, glass shattered. The security detail froze, their training apparently lacking a protocol for resurrection. Nelson used their hesitation. With a roar of effort that seemed to cost him everything, he hauled himself over the edge of the casket and crashed to the floor in a tangle of white silk and fury. His legs buckled immediately, sending him sprawling across the polished granite I'd spent an hour buffing to perfection. "Move," he barked at me, dragging himself forward on his elbows like a wounded animal. "Back exit, now." I should have run toward the security guards, should have screamed for help, should have done literally anything except what I did next, which was grab my cart and ram it into the nearest guard's knees, buying Nelson the precious seconds he needed to reach the service corridor. My body moved on autopilot, years of invisible labor transforming into muscle memory that knew every shortcut, every blind corner, every route the staff used to avoid the mourners. I didn't think. I just ran, my shoes squeaking against the floor as Nelson dragged himself after me, leaving smears of disturbed funeral makeup in his wake. Behind us, someone fired a gun. The bullet punched through a display of sympathy cards, sending paper flowers exploding into confetti. "Left," I gasped, shouldering through the maintenance door. "Service garage." The back lot was empty except for the fleet of black vehicles parked in neat rows, waiting to ferry grief across the city. Nelson crawled toward the nearest hearse, his breathing labored, sweat streaming down his face and mixing with whatever chemicals the morticians had pumped into his veins. He reached for the driver's side door, managed to haul it open, then looked down at his useless legs with an expression of pure rage. "Fuck," he spat, then turned those dark eyes on me. "You drive. I can't. You can, and you will." He pulled himself into the passenger seat with the last of his strength, his body trembling like he'd just run a marathon. "Unless you want to explain to my people why you were helping me escape." The sirens were getting closer. Through the garage entrance, I could see security spilling into the lot. Weapons drawn, shouting into radios. Someone was organizing a perimeter. Someone else was calling for backup. I got behind the wheel. The hearse keys were in the ignition. Henderson's policy for quick departures during multi-funeral days. I turned them with shaking hands, and the engine purred to life with obscene smoothness, as if ferrying the undead was just another Tuesday afternoon. "Drive," Nelson commanded, one hand clutching his chest, the other bracing against the dashboard. His face had gone gray beneath the funeral home makeup, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Now." I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The hearse lurched forward, tires screaming against asphalt as we burst through the garage entrance and into the blinding afternoon sun. Behind us, the funeral home erupted into complete pandemonium. Security shouting, mourners screaming, someone firing another shot that pinged harmlessly off the rear bumper. And beside me, Nelson Williams laughed. A terrible, breathless sound that promised nothing good was waiting at the end of this ride. I didn't know where I was driving until Nelson's hoarse directions guided us through a maze of industrial back streets, that smelled like rust and broken dreams. The hearse felt obscenely out of place here, a glossy black symbol of respectability threading through neighborhoods where respectability had died decades ago. Left at the chain-link fence, he managed, his voice barely above a whisper now. The initial adrenaline that had carried him through our escape was fading fast, leaving behind a trembling wreck of a man who looked like he might pass out at any moment. Red warehouse, loading docks open. The building loomed ahead, a skeletal monument to some forgotten manufacturing empire. Graffiti crawled up its corrugated walls like ivy, and half the windows were boarded over with plywood that had weathered to gray. I pulled the hearse into the loading dock's shadow, killing the engine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Nelson tried to open his door and failed. His fingers slipped off the handle twice before I realized he didn't have the strength left to manage even that simple task. "Stay there," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I circled around to his side, opened the door, and caught him as he listed sideways. He was heavier than he looked, all dense muscle and dead weight, and I nearly dropped him before managing to hook his arm over my shoulders. "I can walk," he growled. "You can't." I half-dragged him toward a side entrance, his feet catching on uneven concrete. "Stop being stubborn and let me help before you collapse." He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a threat, but he leaned into me, and we stumbled through a door that hung off one hinge into the warehouse's dim interior. Inside, the space opened up into a vast emptiness punctuated by support columns and the skeletal remains of conveyor systems. But near the back wall, someone had carved out a crude living space. A ratty couch, a card table, some camping equipment, and crates that probably contained things I didn't want to know about. Safe houses. Nelson Williams had safe houses scattered across the city like a paranoid spider spinning backup webs. I deposited him on the couch, where he immediately slumped sideways, his breathing ragged. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor beneath the funeral makeup, and his lips were cracked and bleeding. The white suit was soaked through with sweat. "Water," he croaked, eyeing me with a suspicion that hadn't dulled despite his obvious distress. "Cabinet behind you. But first, who the fuck are you, really?" "Elise Morgan," I said, finding bottled water among the survival supplies stacked against the wall. "I clean floors at St. Jude's. That's it. That's all I am." "Nobody's just a cleaning woman." He watched me approach like I might be carrying poison instead of hydration. "You knew exactly where that service exit was. You drove like you've done getaway runs before, so I'll ask again. Who sent you?" I twisted the cap off the bottle and held it out to him. His hands were shaking too badly to grip it. After a moment's hesitation, I knelt beside the couch and tipped the bottle to his lips, supporting his head with my other hand. He drank like a man dying of thirst, water spilling down his chin and soaking into the white silk. When he drained half the bottle, I pulled it back, and his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach drop. "Nobody sent me," I said quietly. "I've worked at that funeral home for 5 years. I know the layout because I've mopped every inch of it 1,000 times. I drove because you told me to, and because those security guards were shooting at us. That's the whole story. People don't just help me out of the goodness of their hearts. Maybe I'm the exception." I set the bottle aside and grabbed a clean rag from my pocket. Industrial habit, always carrying cleaning supplies. "Hold still." His suspicion sharpened into something dangerous. "What are you doing? You look like a corpse. If we're going to figure out what happens next, I need to see the actual person underneath all this mortuary theater." I dampened the rag with water and began wiping the funeral makeup from his face before he could protest. The foundation came away in beige streaks, revealing skin several shades darker, bruised and dehydrated but alive. Real. I worked methodically, the way I'd clean anything, with careful attention to detail, removing the artificial layer to expose what lay beneath. Nelson watched me with an expression I couldn't read, his body tense but unmoving, as I traced the rag along his jawline, across his forehead, down the bridge of his nose. The makeup had been applied thick to hide the death pallor, and removing it felt strangely intimate, like I was performing some kind of reverse burial preparation. When I reached the ink that crawled up from his collar, intricate patterns that disappeared beneath the suit, I paused, the rag hovering near the tattoo that curved along his temple like a question mark. Up close, I could see it wasn't just decoration. It was a map of scars turned into art, pain transformed into identity. "Who did this to you?" I asked, not meaning the tattoos. His hand caught my wrist, not roughly, but with enough pressure to stop me. "That's a long list," he said, "and you just made it onto the short list of people who know I'm alive. So, congratulations. You're in this now, whether you like it or not." The next few hours passed in a strange, suspended reality, where the dead man on the couch gradually returned to the living world, while I sat on an overturned crate and tried to process how spectacularly my life had derailed. Nelson drank 3 more bottles of water, his color slowly improving from corpse gray to something approaching human. The trembling in his hands subsided. His breathing evened out. And with each sign of recovery, the dangerous intelligence returned to his eyes. He was planning something. I could see it in the way his gaze went distant, calculating, his fingers tapping against his thigh in patterns that suggested he was counting enemies or plotting moves on some invisible chessboard. "You're going to kill whoever did this to you," I said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between us like a held breath. His eyes snapped to mine. "Yes, just like that? No trial, no proof, no justice," he laughed, and the sound bitter and sharp. "There's no justice in my world, Elise. There's only power and the lack of it. Someone tried to bury me alive. I'm going to return the favor, except I won't fail." I should have been horrified, should have recognized this for what it was, a front row seat to premeditated murder. Instead, I found myself asking, "Do you know who it was?" "I have theories." He sat up slowly, testing his recovered strength. The white suit was ruined, wrinkled and stained, but he wore it like armor anyway. My second-in-command, Marcus, had access to my food. My supplier, Chen, knew my schedule. My lawyer, he stopped, jaw tightening. Could be any of them, could be all of them. "And you're going to what? Kill them all just to be sure? If that's what it takes." He said it without inflection, like he was discussing the weather. "This is what I do, Elise. I'm not a good man playing at being bad. I'm exactly what everyone thinks I am. Then why am I still alive?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "If you're such a monster, why haven't you killed me to keep me quiet?" He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. "I'm still deciding." The threat should have terrified me. Instead, it just made me angry. I stood up, crossing to where he sat, and jabbed a finger toward his chest. "You know what I think? I think you're performing, playing the part everyone expects, the ruthless crime boss who doesn't feel anything, who sees people as assets or obstacles. But that's not the man I saw in that casket. You don't know anything about me. Then explain." I gestured to the tattoos creeping up his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. "You said each one means something, so tell me. Help me understand why I should be sitting here with someone who's planning multiple murders instead of running to the nearest police station." For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. His expression hardened into that mask of casual menace he wore so well. But then his hand moved to his collar, fingers working the buttons of the white suit jacket until he could shrug it off. Beneath, his dress shirt was plastered to his skin with sweat, and the ink I'd glimpsed earlier revealed itself in full. A phoenix rising from flames covered his left shoulder, its wings spreading across his collarbone in intricate detail. Below it, a series of tally marks. Beside those, names in script so small I couldn't read them from where I stood. "This one," he said, touching the phoenix, "was for my mother. She died when I was 14, overdose. Same thing they're saying, killed me, ironically." His voice had gone flat, factual. "I got it the day I killed my first man, the dealer who sold her the Bad Batch. I was 15. I said nothing, sensing that interruption would shatter whatever fragile honesty was emerging. "These marks," he continued, indicating the tallies, "are people I've lost. Not people I've killed, people who mattered. Friends, mostly, all dead before 30. This business has a short life expectancy." His finger moved to the names. "These are debts I still owe. People who helped me when I had nothing, who I swore I'd protect. Some of them I managed to save. Others—" He stopped, jaw working. The ink remembers what I try to forget. The tattoo near his temple, the one I'd traced with the rag, was a crown, wrapped in thorns. He touched it last, almost unconsciously. "And this one?" I asked quietly. "This one's a reminder that power comes with pain, that the throne everyone thinks I want so badly is just another kind of cage." He looked up at me, and for the first time since he'd opened his eyes in that casket, I saw something besides calculation in his expression, something raw and exhausted. "You want to know why you're still alive? Because in that funeral home, when I woke up and couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly, couldn't do anything except lie there like actual cargo, I was terrified, not of dying. I've made peace with dying. I was terrified of being helpless." His hand clenched into a fist against his thigh. "I run this city. I control territories, soldiers, supply chains that span 3 states. People cross the street when they see me coming. And none of it mattered when I was lying in that casket, paralyzed, waiting to suffocate or be buried or worse. But then you heard me," I said, understanding dawning. "Yeah." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone. "I heard you scream, heard you crash your cart into the wall, heard you sound as terrified as I felt. And somehow, that made it easier to fight through the drugs, to move, to survive. Because if you could be that scared and still stand there, then I could be that scared and still get up." The admission hung between us, vulnerable and strange. This was the man beneath the boss, the one who turned scars into stories and fear into forward motion. Still dangerous, still planning violence, but human in a way that made everything infinitely more complicated. "I'm not asking you to forgive what I'm going to do," Nelson said. "I'm just asking you to understand why I can't let this go." I looked at him, really looked, at the map of trauma written across his skin, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the terrible determination that had dragged him out of death itself. "Okay," I heard myself say, "then let me help you figure out who did this. But we do it my way, with proof, with certainty, not just revenge." He laughed, sharp and surprised. "You're negotiating with me?" "Someone has to." I picked up the damp rag, ready to finish cleaning the last traces of death from his face. "Besides, you're in no condition to argue." Nelson's phone had survived the paralytic, the casket, and our escape, somehow still functional in the inner pocket of his ruined suit. He powered it on with the grim determination of a man about to open Pandora's box, and I watched the screen illuminate his face in the warehouse's gathering darkness. "Careful," I warned. "If they think you're dead, turning that on is like sending up a flare." "I know." His thumb hovered over the contacts. "But I need information, and there's only one person I trust enough to call." The name on the screen read simply, V. The call connected after 2 rings. "Yeah?" A woman's voice, sharp and suspicious. "It's me," Nelson said. The silence that followed was profound. Then, "Holy fuck. Boss, they said you were dead. I know. I was there." His eyes flicked to me, then away. "V, I need you to listen very carefully. Someone dosed me with something that mimicked death. I need to know who had access to my food, my drinks, everything from the last 48 hours before I went down." Jesus Christ! I could hear her moving, the rustle of papers or maybe weapons. Okay. You were at the club on Tuesday. Marcus brought you dinner from that Italian place you like, the one on 5th. Wednesday, you met with Chen at the docks, drank whiskey in his office. Thursday morning, you had breakfast at... Marcus brought me food? Nelson's voice went very quiet, very dangerous. "Yeah, he said you were running late for the meeting with the Colombians, wanted to make sure you ate something. Boss, you don't think... Where is he now?" Another pause, longer this time. When V spoke again, her voice had changed, gone careful. "He's handling the transition, making sure your territories don't fall apart during the mourning period. He's been at your penthouse since this morning, going through your files." Nelson's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump beneath the skin. "Going through my files." He said it was necessary for continuity of operations. Boss, if he's the one who... V, I need you to do exactly what I say. Don't tell anyone I'm alive. Not Marcus, not Chen, not even your own mother. Meet me at the Riverside warehouse in 2 hours. Come alone. Can you do that? Of course. But boss, if Marcus is dirty, half your command structure could be compromised. You need to be careful about... The warehouse's loading dock door exploded inward with a crash that shook dust from the rafters. Nelson killed the call instantly, his hand moving to the small of his back where a gun should have been but wasn't. They'd buried him unarmed, naturally. "Move!" He grabbed my wrist, hauling me off the crate and toward the back of the warehouse. Behind us, flashlight beams cut through the darkness like searchlights, accompanied by the measured footsteps of people who knew exactly what they were doing. "So much for trust," I hissed as we ran. "V's solid. They must have been monitoring my phone network, waiting for any sign of activity." He pulled me behind a support column, pressing us both flat against the cold metal. His body was still weak from the ordeal, his breathing already labored, but the adrenaline was doing its work. Stay quiet, stay close. The footsteps spread out, a coordinated search pattern. I counted at least 5 distinct sets of boots on concrete. Professional, organized, the kind of people who wouldn't hesitate to shoot first and confirm the corpse later. "Williams," a voice called out, echoing through the vast space. "Marcus," I recognized the name from Nelson's call. "I know you're here. Your phone pinged this location. Let's talk like civilized people." Nelson's hand tightened on my wrist, a warning to stay silent. In the darkness, I could feel his heart hammering against my shoulder blade where we were pressed together, could smell the lingering chemical scent of embalming fluid mixed with his sweat. "You understand why I had to do it, right?" Marcus continued, his voice moving closer. "You were getting soft, boss, making bad calls. The business needs someone with vision, someone who isn't afraid to expand into territories you were too sentimental to touch." A flashlight beam swept past our column, missing us by inches. Nelson's hand moved to my mouth, covering it gently, his lips near my ear. When I move, you run for the northeast corner. There's an exit behind the old conveyor system. Don't look back. I shook my head violently, reaching up to pull his hand away. I'm not leaving you, I mouthed. Elise, no. The footsteps were getting closer. We could hear them checking behind crates, overturning equipment, systematically eliminating hiding places. Nelson's eyes locked onto mine in the dim light filtering through the broken windows, and something shifted in his expression. Frustration giving way to resignation, giving way to something else entirely. You're insane, he whispered. So are you. Then his mouth was on mine, desperate and furious, and tasting like bottled water and survival. It wasn't gentle or romantic. It was the kiss of two people who might die in the next 60 seconds and needed to feel something real before the end. His hand moved from my mouth to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I grabbed fistfuls of his shirt, anchoring myself to him as the world narrowed to this. His lips, his breath, the solid reality of him against me in the darkness. A flashlight beam hit the wall 6 feet away. We broke apart, both breathing hard. Nelson's pupils were dilated, his expression wild. Northeast corner, he repeated. On 3. Together, I insisted. He looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. The footsteps were right on top of us now, maybe 10 feet away, close enough that I could hear the safety clicking off on someone's weapon. 1, Nelson breathed. A boot scraped against concrete directly behind our column. 2, I grabbed his hand, squeezed once. 3, we ran. Gunfire erupted behind us, muzzle flashes lighting up the warehouse like lightning. Bullets sparked off metal supports and punched through corrugated walls. Nelson pulled me down as we ran, keeping low, using the maze of industrial debris as cover. His weakness from earlier was gone, burned away by adrenaline and rage, and whatever that kiss had ignited between us. The northeast corner loomed ahead, and beyond it, the promise of an exit. Of survival, of whatever came next in this impossible situation we'd been thrown into together. Behind us, Marcus was screaming orders, and the gunfire was getting closer. We didn't look back. We made it out through the northeast exit by pure momentum and luck, tumbling into an alley that smelled like rotting produce and desperation. Nelson's legs finally gave out halfway down the block, and I caught him before he face-planted into a dumpster, both of us gasping for air that tasted like freedom and adrenaline. Your penthouse, I managed between breaths. That's where Marcus is. Nelson nodded, still trying to catch his breath. Sweat had plastered his shirt to his chest, and in the yellow glow of the streetlight he looked half dead again. Command center. All my records, contacts, cash reserves. If he's there, he's not just going through files, he's consolidating power, probably calling in favors, making promises, rewriting the hierarchy with himself at the top. Then we go there. I straightened, pulling him upright with me. We end this tonight. He laughed, sharp and incredulous. We? Elise, you just got shot at, multiple times. This is where you walk away and pretend none of this happened. I helped you escape a funeral home. I drove a stolen hearse across the city. I just kissed a crime lord while people were actively trying to murder us. I met his eyes steadily. I'm already in this, and unlike you, I'm not weak enough to slow us down. The barb hit home. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue, probably because we both knew it was true. Whatever they dosed him with, it was still working through his system, leaving him functional but compromised. He needed help, and right now, I was the only help available. The building's going to be locked down tight, he said as we started moving again, keeping to shadows. Marcus isn't stupid. He'll have guards on every entrance, cameras watching the lobby, security protocols that would make a bank vault jealous. Then it's a good thing I don't need to go through the front door. Nelson stopped walking. What? Your penthouse is in the Monarch building, right? 37 floors, black glass exterior, that pretentious golden M above the entrance. When he nodded, I felt a smile tug at my lips for the first time in hours. I worked there before St. Jude's. 3 years on the night cleaning crew. I know every service entrance, every maintenance tunnel, every override code the building manager thought was secret. Something shifted in his expression. Calculation mixing with what might have been respect. You're serious. Dead serious. I paused, then added, poor choice of words, but yes, I can get us in. The question is what we do once we're inside. Leave that to me. The dangerous edge was back in his voice. The man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, returning now that he had a plan. Just get me to the 37th floor unseen. I'll handle Marcus. 20 minutes later, we were standing in front of a rusted service store half hidden behind a dumpster 3 blocks from the Monarch building. The entrance led to the underground tunnel system that connected the major buildings downtown, a relic from the city's industrial past that maintenance crews still used, but everyone else forgot existed. I still had my work keys. 5 years of carrying the same key ring, collecting access to buildings across the district like other people collected stamps. The master key slid into the lock like coming home, and the door opened with a groan of protesting metal. Inside, the tunnel was exactly as I remembered. Concrete walls weeping with moisture, flickering utility lights casting everything in sickly yellow, the distant sound of water dripping echoing like a countdown. Nelson followed me into the darkness, and I heard him inhale sharply as the reality of where we were sank in. The building's foundation connects to this tunnel system about 200 yards ahead, I explained, moving confidently through the maze. From there, we can access the service elevator. It'll take us straight to the mechanical floor between 36 and 37. After that, there's a maintenance hatch that opens into the penthouse's utility closet. You're telling me there's been a direct route into my supposedly secure penthouse this entire time? He sounded somewhere between impressed and furious. Every building has vulnerabilities. The expensive security systems just make people forget about the basic ones. I turned a corner, navigating by memory in the faded directional signs painted on the walls decades ago. This is how the night crew moved between buildings without being seen. Management liked us invisible, remember? They made it easy for us to stay that way. We reached the Monarch building's access point. Another locked door. Another key from my collection. Beyond it, the service elevator waited like a faithful servant, humming quietly in its shaft. I hit the call button and we rode up in silence, the tension building with each floor that passed. The mechanical level was a maze of HVAC equipment and electrical panels, the air thick with the smell of machine oil and ozone. I led Nelson through it like I'd done it 1,000 times before, because I had. The maintenance hatch was exactly where I remembered, secured with a standard lock that my master key opened without resistance. After you, I whispered, gesturing to the opening. Nelson hesitated, his hand on the hatch edge. Elise, when this starts, when I confront Marcus, it's going to get violent. If you're not ready for that, I'm ready. I reached into my cleaning supply pocket and pulled out a small canister of an industrial degreaser. This stuff can strip paint off metal. It'll work on human eyes too. I'm not just your ticket inside anymore. He stared at the canister, then at me, and something like wonder crossed his face. You're full of surprises. So are you. Now move. We emerged into the penthouse's utility closet, cramped and dark, and smelling of expensive cleaning products. Through the door, I could hear voices. Marcus giving orders, other men responding, the sound of furniture being moved. They were settling in, getting comfortable in their stolen kingdom. Nelson pressed his ear to the door, listening. His body had gone very still, very focused. The weakness from earlier burned away by purpose. When he looked back at me, his eyes were cold and clear. There are at least 4 guards in the main room. Marcus will be in my office, behind the desk like he owns it. His voice was barely audible. I needed distraction, something to pull the guards away from the office door. I thought fast, mental inventory of the penthouse layout clicking into place. Fire alarm. There's a pull station in the kitchen. If I trigger it, building protocol requires evacuation to the stairwells. That'll clear the room, but not Marcus. He'll know it's a trick. Then we make it convincing. I looked down at my canister of degreaser. This stuff is highly flammable. I could start an actual fire in the kitchen, small enough to control, but real enough to trip the smoke detectors. Nelson studied me for a long moment. You know, once you do that, there's no going back. You'll be an accomplice to everything that happens next. I was an accomplice the moment I helped you out of that casket. I met his gaze steadily. Let's finish this. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. 60 seconds after you pull that alarm, I'm moving on the office. Don't get caught. Same to you. I slipped out of the utility closet first, moving with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd spent years being overlooked. The kitchen was 20 feet away, separated from the main living area by a partial wall. I could see the guards from here. 4 men in tactical gear, relaxed but alert, weapons holstered but accessible. The kitchen was pristine, all marble and stainless steel, and probably worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime. I found a dish towel, doused it with degreaser, and stuffed it halfway into the fancy espresso machine's drip tray. Then I pulled out the lighter I still carried from my smoking days. 3 years quit, but habits die hard, and held the flame to the chemical-soaked fabric. It caught instantly, blue flames racing across the towel with gratifying speed. I backed toward the fire alarm, watching the smoke begin to curl upward toward the ceiling-mounted detectors. One of the guards noticed the smoke. "Hey, what the—" I pulled the alarm. The penthouse erupted into chaos, sirens wailing, lights flashing, guards shouting and scrambling toward the kitchen. I pressed myself against the wall, letting them rush past, just another piece of furniture they didn't need to notice. Through the chaos, I saw Nelson move. He was a shadow slipping through the distracted guards, heading for the office door with lethal purpose. One guard turned, started to raise his weapon, started to shout a warning. I didn't think, I just moved. The degreaser canister hit the guard's face at point-blank range, and he went down screaming, clawing at his eyes. His weapon clattered across the expensive hardwood floor, and then Nelson was through the office door, and I was right behind him, and Marcus was looking up from behind the desk with an expression of pure shock as the dead man walked back into his kingdom. "Hello, Marcus," Nelson said softly. "We need to talk about your retirement plan." Marcus went for the gun in his desk drawer. He was fast, faster than I expected from a man who'd spent the evening playing king, but Nelson was faster. His hand slammed down on the desktop, pinning the drawer shut with enough force to crack the expensive wood. "I wouldn't," Nelson said, his voice carrying that particular quality of violence held in check, a gun with the safety off. "You've already made enough mistakes tonight." Marcus's face cycled through shock, fear, calculation, and finally settled on a desperate kind of defiance. "You're supposed to be dead." I was. Thanks for that, by the way. The paralytic was a nice touch, conscious but immobile, aware of everything happening but unable to scream. Must have cost you a fortune to get the dosage right. Nelson leaned across the desk, and I saw Marcus flinch backward despite himself. "Who helped you? Jen? The Colombians? Or did you manage this masterpiece all by yourself?" "It doesn't matter." Marcus's hand was still on the drawer handle, fingers twitching like he was calculating whether he could get the gun out fast enough. "You're finished, Nelson. Your empire is already being carved up. Your territory's redistributed. Your people are taking my calls now. Even if you kill me, you can't undo what's already in motion. Watch me." The office door burst open. The guards we'd distracted had regrouped, weapons drawn, 4 men crowding into the doorway with Marcus behind the desk and Nelson standing in front of it like some kind of corporate standoff. For a moment, everyone froze, trying to process the impossible reality of the situation. Then, I stepped out from behind Nelson, still holding my canister of industrial degreaser like it was the most dangerous weapon in the room. Which, given the flammable chaos I'd already caused in the kitchen, maybe it was. "Nobody move," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Unless you want to find out what happens when I spray this into the open flame you idiots left burning in the kitchen." It was a bluff, sort of. The fire was small, contained, probably already triggering the building's sprinkler system. But these men didn't know that. They knew there was smoke, knew the alarms were screaming, knew that their carefully orchestrated takeover had gone sideways the moment their supposedly dead boss walked back through the door. "Who the fuck is this?" one of the guards demanded, gun trained on me but eyes flickering nervously toward Nelson. "This," Nelson said, something almost like pride in his voice, "is Elise Morgan, the woman who brought me back from the dead. And the reason none of you are walking out of this room if you don't lower your weapons right now. She's a cleaning lady," Marcus spat, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "She's nobody." "I was a cleaning lady," I corrected, taking a step forward. The guards shifted nervously, their training fighting against the psychological advantage Nelson commanded just by existing. Now I'm the person standing between you and a man who crawled out of his own casket for revenge. How do you think this ends for you? The standoff held for 3 eternal seconds. Then the guard I'd hit with the degreaser earlier stumbled into view behind his colleagues, still rubbing his streaming eyes, his face red and blistered from the chemical burn. The sight of him, evidence that I wasn't bluffing about being dangerous, broke something in the group's resolve. The first gun lowered, then the second, then all of them, a cascade of submission that Nelson accepted like it was always inevitable. "Get out," Nelson said quietly. "All of you. Tell everyone you see that I'm alive, that Marcus's little coup is over, and that anyone who took his side has 48 hours to make peace with their gods or make peace with me. Their choice." The guards fled. Smart men, in the end. They'd survive to take orders another day, probably from Nelson himself once the dust settled. That was how power worked in his world. Loyalty flowed toward whoever could enforce it. And right now, the dead man walking commanded more fear than the usurper behind the desk, which left just the 3 of us in the office, Nelson, Marcus, and me. "You can't kill me," Marcus said, but his voice had gone thin, desperate. "I have insurance, documents that go public if I don't check in every 12 hours. Everything about your operations, your contacts, your insurance is sitting on a server in the basement," Nelson interrupted. "The same server my IT guy has been monitoring since you started accessing my files this morning. V's already wiping it clean. You've got nothing, Marcus. You've always had nothing. That's why you had to try and kill me instead of building something of your own." Marcus's hand moved toward the drawer again, a last desperate gambit. This time, Nelson didn't stop him. He just stepped back, giving Marcus room to pull out the gun, to point it with shaking hands, to make the final mistake that would seal his fate. I moved before I realized I was moving, the degreaser canister catching Marcus's wrist at the precise angle to send the gun spinning away. He lunged for it, and Nelson's fist caught him in the jaw with a crack that echoed off the mahogany walls. Marcus went down hard, blood streaming from his mouth, and didn't get up. "Call V," Nelson said to me, not taking his eyes off Marcus's crumpled form. "Tell her to send a cleanup crew, and get me a phone. I have a lot of calls to make." The next few hours were a blur of activity I only half understood. V arrived with a team that handled Marcus with the efficient brutality of people who'd done this before. Phone calls were made. Orders were given. The fire department cleared the building, and through it all, Nelson orchestrated the resurrection of his empire with the methodical precision of a conductor leading a symphony. I should have left, should have walked away while the chaos provided cover, returned to my small apartment and my simple life, and pretended this had all been some fever dream. But when Nelson looked at me across that blood-stained office and said, "Stay," I found I couldn't do anything else. 6 months later, I walked into that same office wearing a tailored suit the color of midnight, my hair styled professionally instead of pulled back in a practical bun, my hands free of yellow latex gloves for the first time in 6 years. The transformation felt surreal, like watching someone else live my life. Nelson stood by the window, backlit by the city he'd reclaimed, wearing a pristine white suit that somehow looked even better than the ruined one from the funeral home. He'd gained back the weight he'd lost, the color had returned to his face, and the empire he'd built had settled back into its foundations stronger than before. "The shipment from Chen arrived on schedule," I reported, settling into the chair across from his desk, the chair that used to be Marcus's before Marcus made his final mistake. V confirmed the counts. "Everything's clean." "Good." He turned from the window, and the smile that crossed his face was the private one, the one reserved for moments when we were alone. "The Colombians? Negotiations are proceeding. They respect the new terms." I paused, allowing myself a small smile in return. "They also asked who you'd put in charge of territory oversight." I told them they'd find out soon enough. "Let them wonder." He crossed to the desk, but instead of sitting behind it, he leaned against the edge, close enough that I could see the faint scar on his jaw where Marcus's bullet had grazed him during our escape. "You've earned it, Elise. Partner, not employee. Equal, not subordinate. A cleaning lady turned crime boss." I shook my head, still somewhat amazed by the trajectory my life had taken. My mother would be horrified. My mother would have liked you. He reached out, his hand finding mine. She always said the most dangerous people were the ones everyone underestimated. Through the office windows, the city sprawled beneath us, all glittering lights and dark secrets. Somewhere down there, people were living simple lives, pushing mops and cleaning floors and going home to small apartments. I'd been one of them once. Part of me still was. In the quiet moments when I remembered the weight of the cart handle in my hands, the smell of antiseptic, the fluorescent lights of the funeral home. But that wasn't my world anymore. My world was here, in this office, standing beside a man who'd crawled out of death itself and dragged me into the light, or the darkness, with him. "So," Nelson said, pulling me from my thoughts. "Ready for the evening meeting? The Russians are expecting us." I straightened my suit jacket, checked the small canister I still carried in my pocket, upgraded from degreaser to something significantly more lethal, and met his eyes with the confidence of someone who'd learned to be dangerous. "Always," I said. We walked out together, equals in white and black, the dead man and the woman who'd brought him back, ready to rule the empire we'd fought so hard to reclaim. Behind us, the office door closed with a soft click, sealing away the past and opening toward whatever future we'd build together. One decision, one risk, one impossible resurrection at a time. So, what did you think? From a funeral home janitor to a crime boss's equal, Elise's journey was anything but ordinary. Drop a comment and let me know. Would you have helped Nelson escape that casket, or would you have run the other way? If you made it this far, you're clearly invested in these stories. So do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It costs you nothing, but means everything to creators like me trying to bring you more content like this. Want more stories about unlikely alliances, second chances, and people who refuse to stay dead? Check out the playlist linked in the description or stick around. There's always another story coming soon. And seriously, where are you watching from? I love seeing all the different places this story reaches. Comment below. Thanks for reading with me. Until next time, stay dangerous, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most powerful people are the ones everyone underestimated.